So all the talk at Manchester United so far this year has been about continuing the big rebuild. And normally when we talk about a rebuild, we're looking at players that we can bring into the club, finding that next young superstar or the ready-made world beater that can take us to the next level. But of course, if you want to sign those players, you need some money. Manchester United don't have too much money, so we need to get some players off the books. And apparently, this may be the year that we offload 10 different players in the summer. Now, I know we've heard that before and it hasn't come true, but this time I actually think it's possible because there are 10 players who quite clearly have a path out of the club. So we can actually almost split these 10 players into 4 different categories, and the first category is going to be the players that are likely to retire. Of course, we won't get a lot of money for this, but it will be wages off the books and it will free up some spaces in the squad. One player that will probably retire this summer is Johnny Evans. We haven't seen him playing for United for some time now, since the early Amorim days. He seems to have sort of completely disappeared. I don't really know that he was ever brought to the club to actually be a player. It always felt that he was here to be more of a coach, you know, get his coaching badges done. But at times he has been a really useful player for us, but it makes sense for the next step of progression for him to retire and sort of move on a little bit. The same is also the case for Tom Heaton as well. Apparently he is going to retire. Now, I'm a little bit more disappointed about this one because I think Tom Heaton is a good character around the squad. He's got good experience. He doesn't demand first-team football, so I think he's a good player to have around. But again, if he's at that stage in his career where he wants to be retiring, there's no point in Manchester United trying to convince him otherwise, I don't think. So he is another one that I would imagine will leave and free up some wages. Now, the next category of players is players that have barely featured for Manchester United this season. And of course, the most obvious one is Luke Shaw. Now, before you jump at me in the comments saying it's impossible to get rid of him because of wages, etc., I know it's tough, but in my opinion, United have to find a way to get him gone, simply because we're paying him every week to sit on the bench, or not even on the bench, the injury bench. I love Luke Shaw. I think he's an amazing left-back. You guys that have been on the channel for a while now will know that I rate him as one of the very best left-backs in world football. And I think, had he had an injury-free career, he could have been one of the best in history. Genuinely, as left-backs go, I think he's top tier. But the best ability, easy for me to say, the best ability is availability, and Luke Shaw doesn't bring availability. Is there a chance he gets fit before the end of the season to sort of prove himself? Maybe. But it just feels that you're always taking a risk, you're taking a gamble. So I think it's time United try and move him on. It will not be easy to do, because finding a club that wants him will be tough, right? Because the whole world knows about his injury problems. But hopefully for his sake, he can get a move, he can keep some fitness, and actually go play football somewhere. Someone else we haven't really seen too much of this season is Victor Lindelof. Now, Lindelof is another player who has had injury problems this season, but overall in his career, he's been a good servant to Manchester United. But I just don't think there is an obvious fit for him in the Ruben Amorim system. Amorim seems to have been a little bit hesitant to use him. I think most of us viewed him as a wider centre-back in the back three. Amorim has used him in the middle, and in terms of if he's here as a central centre-back, we've got other players that are better. Lenny Yoro, De Ligt, Maguire, so I don't really think Lindelof has a place anymore. Another player that fits into that sort of barely played for us this season category is another one who has had injury problems, but also actually been loaned out in the second half of the season. It is, of course, Tyrell Malacia. Now, this one feels a little bit harsh because it's not his fault that he got injured, right? But he has had a really bad injury, and that does take an effect on an ability or a player's ability to develop. His development has been stunted from being out of the game for so long. Now, I think when he came back into the United team, he had some good games, but Amorim has said it himself. He's not really a wing-back, and he's not really a centre-back. He is a traditional full-back, and United aren't using full-backs at the moment. And, you know, for some players, I think you can make exceptions to keep a player if they really are that talented, and you sort of find a way to fit them into the team. But in the case of Tyrell Malacia, I just don't think that's what we've got here. A good player, but not a great player. And I think he probably will be moved on this summer. Again, it will free up some wages. We'll be able to get a little bit of money for him, and he wasn't too expensive in the first place, so hopefully we can make a profit there. But yeah, I think Tyrell Malacia, really good in that first season. I think he had some bright moments. The injury just, unfortunately, completely ruined his Manchester United career, and it's time to go. Now, for the next category, what we've got is players that are clearly good at football, but physically just not really what United need anymore. We spoke about this the other day. All Amorim talks about is physicality and intensity. And there's a couple of players that don't really fill that criteria, one of which is Christian Eriksen. No doubt a good footballer. A footballer that I still think can play at a very decent level, particularly perhaps in a slower league, where he gets time to showcase his passing, his creativity, perhaps playing more as a 10. He's still a great player, he always has been. But unfortunately, physically, he's not what United need anymore. He doesn't win his duels very well at all. He doesn't cover the ground like he once did back in his Tottenham days. He's just not the physical package that I think United need. He also doesn't really naturally fit a position, I don't feel, in the current system. You know, he's not a proper deep-lying dictating midfielder, but he's also not a box-to-box midfielder. He doesn't bring a lot of ball carrying or things like that. And of course, off the ball, he is an issue when we're trying to press high. He doesn't have the intensity, the physicality. So I think Christian Eriksen will be moved on this summer. And I think there will be clubs that want him. I think he's a good player, so he will move on. And again, that will free up a decent amount of wages, as will, hopefully, Casemiro. Now, Casemiro has had somewhat of a revival, I would say, this season, particularly in the last 6 weeks. I think he's really come quite good. He's proved that he's not a finished player. You know, that in a better system under Amorim than what we previously played under Erik ten Hag, where Casemiro's a little bit more protected. I think he's done very well. But, and there is always that but, he is obviously reaching a point in his career where he's not the player he once was. Of course, on the ball, he brings a huge upside. I think his progressive play is really useful for us. But in games where we want to slow it down and control possession a little bit more, he is still a little bit too direct. And I think realistically, the big main problem is off the ball. Again, the physical levels, you know, he's good in the boxes, don't get me wrong. He's still strong in the tackle. But in terms of an open pitch, pressing high, then having to track back and make recovery runs and things like that, it all just feels a little bit too much for Casemiro. Could you maybe keep him as a bench option, a bit of experience in the squad? Possibly, but when his wages are so high, I think that's very difficult to do. So for me, you either negotiate a contract where his wages come down, which Casemiro probably won't want to take, especially for bench time, or you try and move him on. And again, I do think there will be clubs in the summer that are interested. I don't think it's one of these moves where, you know, you sell him to Saudi for £40 million. That's not going to happen. It won't be a lot of money, but money is money, sort of, really, at this point for United. We are kind of desperate, and I think Casemiro is a player that just the wages alone really would help us. Now, the last category is a bit more of a simple one. It's simply forwards. Manchester United have a collection of forwards that have got to a point in their career where perhaps they're not deemed good enough, or they're not the right tactical fit, not the right stylistic fit, or the wrong attitude, whatever. We've got a lot of forwards at this club, and it feels like a few of them could go now. One of those is Antony, who sort of written off at Manchester United, but he's had this loan move to Real Betis where he seemed to be performing really well. I haven't actually watched any of those games, I will be honest. I've seen a couple of compilations and he looks bright. He's of course getting himself goals and assists, and for his confidence, that must be huge, right? He must be sort of revitalised mentally as a footballer. So that's great for him. This is evidence of a loan move working. Why is the loan move working? Well, perhaps it is because of the slower intensity in La Liga. It's not as physically demanding, and perhaps that slightly slower pace just suits Antony. It suits his game a little bit more, and it allows him to express himself. I think realistically, though, that maybe proves something, that he's not right for the Premier League, so let's move him on. Just because he's done well for Real Betis, that doesn't mean he's right for Manchester United. Now, I'll be honest, I would have liked Amorim to have given him a bit more of a chance when he first came into the club, either as a wing-back or a sort of ball retention 10. I actually think he could have done a good job because, like I said, he does keep the ball well, he plays pretty well with his back to goal, and some of his combination play is quite good. But again, I think if we're talking power, physicality, things like that, he doesn't really bring it. And then if he's not bringing that, the technical level has to be amazing, and I don't think it's amazing. I think it's good. So I'd imagine Antony will be moved on. And another one is Jadon Sancho. Now, this one's a little bit of a mess. It seems as though, to me, United don't want him, but Chelsea also maybe don't want him either, which is creating a bit of a messy situation. Either way, I don't see Jadon Sancho having a future at Manchester United. Will it be, you know, Chelsea paying that obligation? I don't know. Will it be United keeping him and he goes to someone like Borussia Dortmund, or perhaps to a different league, like the French league, for example? I don't know, but I just don't see a future for Jadon Sancho. If you guys disagree, let me know in the comments down below, but I just don't see where he fits in anymore. It just feels like all ties with the club completely burned the bridge. The club did that, and so did Sancho between them. This wasn't, you know, Sancho's wrong, or Ten Hag was wrong, or Manchester United were wrong. I think everyone was wrong, and it was a mess of a situation, and I think it's one of those ones where it's easier just to cut it off, end it, let him restart his career somewhere else, and again, hopefully for him, he has a good career somewhere because he's clearly a good talent, and for United, hopefully they get some decent money for him, and again, it's a lot of wages that we will not be paying. And then the last player, Marcus Rashford. This one's going to divide opinion. and rightfully so, it should. This is the best player we have had from our academy in the last 10 years or so now, I would say. Marcus Rashford, he is a player that many of us have grown up watching at United and become very attached to. However, naturally, in players' careers, there does come a moment where perhaps it's just not right anymore. And perhaps we have reached that stage with Rashford and Manchester United. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Rashford is a must sell, because I don't view him in that way. You guys know that I think he's a very, very good player. When he's playing with confidence and things like that, I think he's a wonderful talent, sort of as a player like an inside forward tucking in from the left-hand side. I think he's got a lot of ability. Wherever he goes, or stays, I don't know, he'll score goals, he will grab assists, and he will have a big impact. He is the sort of, almost like the main guy in a lot of teams. He would be that. He could go to a lot of teams in Europe and be their main man. Is that going to be Manchester United? Or again, is it a case of the bridge sort of being burned? Not between Rashford and United, I don't think. I think the United fan base will always, hopefully, have a lot of respect for Rashford, and they should, because Rashford certainly has respect for United. But, you know, was there a falling out with Ruben Amorim and Rashford? I don't know. Was this an Ineos-related thing? Did Ineos instigate this a little bit more? I don't know. I don't want to try and suggest something that I don't know. I just feel that it may be just easier, even if a little bit sad, just a little bit easier to let Rashford go this summer. Again, you're going to get a decent fee for him. Nowhere near as much as you should, because for me, he's worth a lot of money, but we're not going to get that because we've sort of shown that we don't want him, which will bring the price down. But again, just getting his wages off the book would be absolutely massive. And I think if you can kind of let those 10 players go, some of them for free, some of them retiring, some of them, I don't know, maybe on a pre-contract, whatever, it's not going to be a lot of money for United, because unfortunately the club has been run really, really poorly for a lot of years now. The contract situation has been awful for a lot of years. So we're not going to get a lot of money in terms of transfer fees, I don't feel. But I do think if you can really get some of these wages out of the club, and then the new players you sign, you aren't as generous with the contract, right? Hopefully if we do that, we can lower the wages that we're spending, which gives us a bit more budget, a bit more flexibility financially. And hopefully United can then afford to spend a bit of money in the summer. So I think those are the 10 that I would sort of grudgingly sell this summer, even though there's a couple that I don't want to give up on just yet. I think United will. But if there are any players here that you disagree with in this video, let me know in the comments down below. Let's say you can take one of these 10 out and put a different player in. For example, you might take Rashford out and sell Mason Mount instead. Let me know in the comments down below one change that you would make to this list of 10. But apart from that, we are finished for today's video. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.